Yeah, this is an old game. Spider-Man for the PlayStation 1 is a game developed by Neversoft and published by Activision in the year 2000, making it one of the first Spider-Man games to ever have been made. I think nobody needs an introduction to this character. He's had an absolute swarm of representation in media recently with movies, games, and more. I love him, you love him, and this is what really began to open people's eyes to Spider-Man. Growing up, I was always more of a DC kid into characters like Flash and Batman, but there was always one character in the Marvel Universe that stood out to me. It just so happens that Spider-Man was my favorite superhero for a long-ass time in my early years, only until recently when my love for Batman has kind of been reignited. Yet, something about Spider-Man in particular has always been so special. He's a likable, cool kid, not adult, from New York that just wants to swing around having fun and saving lives. Something about that just resonates with younger audiences, and plenty of adults too. There were a few Spider-Man games that had come out before this one, but, well, yeah. This was the very first time you could swing around as Spidey in a fully 3D world, which was just something absolutely mind-blowing back then. This still stands out as the first good Spider-Man game, and even the first good comic book game in general. Coming out, it received critical acclaim, 9s and 10s across the board, as it was a true innovation for games. You didn't really have superheroes flying around a 3D map back then. Games just weren't ready for that yet. But Spider-Man for the PS1 still did something special, and it's what carved the way for all the next Spider-Man games to come. Various mechanics, like the player-controlled web swinging, are still getting reused even in our current-day games, and now that we have so many games with this character to go experience, we don't really think about what started it all. It had been developed with the same engine as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, arguably one of the biggest gaming franchises of the time, and been announced in late 1998, which was about a year and a half prior to release. It actually did get versions developed for other consoles like the Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, and even the Game Boy. However, some of them weren't technologically as powerful, so certain things did have to be adjusted, like the fully running cutscenes instead being swapped for comic strips in between levels. This game features a lot of neat things, like a full cast of Marvel characters, authentic voice actors who played in the animated show, and even some cool Easter eggs. This game was obviously before my time, but there's still something about it that makes this a perfect Spider-Man game for me. A ridiculous, yet fun plot, an incredibly well-represented Spider-Man, and the, for the time, great boss fights, all mixed together to create what I consider to almost be a masterpiece, even though obviously there's still going to be issues. I think this game has aged incredibly well, and even if you've never played it before, I reckon it's worth a go all these 20-so years later. So, let's dive into Spider-Man for the PS1 and see what it failed at and what it did great at. Hey, really quick before anything starts, I know messages like this on videos are super annoying, but following the success on my recent video, I just want to make sure that I say if you end up enjoying this one, I'd absolutely appreciate it so much if you were to like the video and hit subscribe. I have a few other videos up on my channel breaking down different games just like this one, so you should definitely check those out if it's your kind of thing. I know a lot of new people ended up finding me from that Manhunt video since it kind of blew up, which, by the way, I'm just so over the moon about the success on that, genuinely, so thanks so much, and I hope you all have fun with this one too. That's all, back to the video now. Enjoy, everyone. I think this game has the most Spider-Man-like adventure-type feel to it of all time. I mean, the amount of stuff you do in this game is insane, and it features so many different characters from all over the MCU as well. Honestly, if you're not already decently familiar with Marvel characters before playing this game, you're probably gonna be like, super confused. I know I was when I first played it, but now coming back like 12 or so years later, my gallery with them has kind of expanded and I can much better understand what's actually going on. Don't get me wrong, all you really need to play this game is the base Spider-Man knowledge of the characters and villains. People like Mary Jane, Rhino, Venom, and Carnage all appear in this game and take center stage, but there's still a heavy amount of side characters which you might have no idea who they are. There is just a ridiculous amount of people in this game, like, especially when compared to newer games. It's surprising. We have Spider-Man himself, Mary Jane, Black Cat, Daredevil, the Punisher, Captain America, Mysterio, Venom, Carnage, J. Jonah Jameson, Scorpion, and honestly, I could go on. I kind of miss having Spider-Man games more connected to the outside universe of Marvel because seeing all these people appear and interact with each other is just so much fun. It makes Spidey feel like he's in a really big, pre-established world, and this being kind of a one-off game, it doesn't feel empty at all. The world feels huge because of how many characters come into the story at one point or another, and it really gives you this sense of scale. Spider-Man himself is portrayed about as perfectly as you can get, which is the main reason I think I love this game. He's fun, making his clever quips at every opportunity, and he even has a really well-shown moral moment at one point in the story. He's never some annoying and cringe bastard, he's always enjoyable to listen to and makes you feel good. I'd say Spider-Man in general is a very feel-good character, even though he can have dark moments, and that's why he's so different from other superheroes. And this game captures that kind of energy perfectly. All of the rest of the characters are also well represented in this game, especially Venom. I prefer Venom to be this scary, badass monster, however, I can still enjoy the more fun approach to his character too. He's more of a comedic relief type character, and you even end up working together with him later in the game. He even saves Mary Jane. The city itself feels so fresh because the environment will never get stale. There's so many different kinds of missions in this game that you're almost always in a new setting every time. I mean, you go from saving hostages and defusing a bomb in an office, to beating up a bunch of lizard monsters on a moving train, to destroying symbiote generators in the Daily Bugle. It's fucking bizarre. You're never in one place too long, and you're never just swinging around in an empty-ass, lifeless city. There's a few rooftop levels, but they always feature something fun, like having to get somewhere quickly while a bunch of bad guys try to stop you, or having to race Venom around the rooftops, or even getting fired at by an attack helicopter. There is always something to spice it up. The levels are built more linearly, and you can't just go swing around a sandbox New York, because that kind of stuff just wasn't possible back then. So they actually came up with an in-canon reason why you can't go around the city. There's harmful gas spread all around the streets, and if you go too low into it, you'll lose control of Spider-Man and he dies. Also, the death animations in this game are really funny. I don't know how to describe why, but they just are. I think the graphics of this game are especially charming, even though they're blocky as shit. There's just something about them that hits the nostalgia part of my brain with a hammer. The hands look, well, ridiculous on most characters, and in general they kind of look like they're made of Play-Doh, but this is what playing a PS1 game is fun for, seeing how our games have aged. What I'll say hasn't aged well though is those cutscenes. They were the best they could do for the time, but now, yeah, they're pretty unfortunate. As you would guess, this game's controls are, well, god-awful. This is sort of to be expected if you're going into a PS1 title, but it's still worth bringing up. The camera isn't controllable with the right analog stick and is instead locked onto Spider-Man himself, pointed whichever direction he is facing. So, if you want to look somewhere else, you're gonna have to turn your character around and wait for the camera to follow, since there is kind of a delay. This made combat really annoying sometimes because I couldn't really see what the fuck is going on, since the camera is doing something completely different. But it's much more manageable if you can just run away for a second and get the camera back on track and then re-enter the fight. Besides this though, this game does a really good job with using Spider-Man's powers. You can swing around with your webs, crawl on walls, jump super high, and do all kinds of special web moves against your enemies. You can do your classic web that just tangles up an enemy, but use different combinations too, like up plus web will have Spider-Man shoot a big freaking web ball at anyone in its path, which deals heavy damage. Right plus web will make this little web house thing that explodes and knocks all the enemies back a bit on detonation. Left plus web will give you these webbed up fist things that deal extra damage when hitting people. And down web will kind of pull an enemy towards you, although this one is so jank it's not even worth using in the first place. These are all fun to use and alternate with in combat, although you're never really incentivized to use different ones. You could actually go this whole game without really using your web in combat if you wanted to, excluding the boss fights. I would have liked it if enemies had weaknesses that tailored to your web powers, like maybe some kind of enemy couldn't go down to a normal punch because it's just too weak. But if you wanted to use your extra damage web fists, you'll be able to pack some damage in there and take them out. I can't say that these mechanics don't control pretty poorly as well though, because a ton of times I would find myself trying to do one thing, but then the game would just do something completely different. Like if I wanted to do the web pull move, it would just do web fists or the web explosion move instead, and this can get pretty annoying. Web swinging is always consistent and won't really glitch up on you, but you can't just web around at will. It seems like you have to have some kind of structure in the near distance to be able to web towards it, and Spider-Man will kind of auto-lock on this target and land on it himself. You can only go in one direction whenever you started swinging though, so if you accidentally mess up the angle, you'd better hope there's some way to save yourself or you're pretty much fucked. You can't really do any web moves other than these, but you can use them in special ways, like zipping up to the ceiling with R1, which is a really useful feature, or being able to precisely choose where to web to with L1. You can also activate switches and buttons from a distance by shooting a web at it as well. Your web can actually run out though, so you'll want to pick up the blue spider tokens around the map, which will add to your web cartridge count. How much you have is represented by a meter, which will lower as you use web, and if you run out, it feels kind of dangerous since the web is what really glues all the combat together. Other than web though, you still have all your basic fighter moves. Punch, kick, you can throw shit at people, and use whatever web move you want to use. It can feel kind of stiff at times, but combat in games was never really pushed past this until Batman Arkham Asylum came along with the introduction of the free flow system. Although I have to say that with all the different moves possible here and being able to mix and match them all in combat with your foes, this kind of feels like an early rendition of free flow combat. Spider-Man's health isn't a big amount in this game, which makes sense because, well, he's a kid. There's white spider tokens that will replenish your health bar if you're running low, but not by much, and these are also pretty scarce, so losing health is something you'll really want to shy away from in this game. I played on hard mode when replaying the game for this video, and let me tell you, it's hard. Like, really damn hard. So retaining as much HP as possible is vital in this game. Some of the enemies can feel kinda bullshit though, namely the purple symbiote guys. They do so much damage and take so many hits to defeat that I was losing my mind on the sections of the game with these in it. They just don't really feel fair, as they can literally teleport away and throw goo at you from a distance. The only solid way to take these guys out is by finding these incendiary web cartridge pickups around the map, but these are very rare and you'll almost never have them. However, when you do, you will just blaze through them with your web. The crocodile guys also were a little annoying at times since they could easily gang up on you as your web doesn't really do anything to stop them. But all the rest of the enemies I'd say are pretty much completely fine. There is a little bit of puzzle solving, far and few between here, which I'll admit I did enjoy. There's one section where you have to figure out how to get rid of a bomb, a section where you have to hit the right order of switches to open a bunch of doors, and a couple more minor things sprinkled throughout. While they're never anything mind-blowing and usually have simple solutions, I still enjoy them and welcome their addition to the game. All you have to do for the bomb is just open the safe and chuck it in there, and the door sequence thingy only took me a few seconds of fiddling around with the switches to get right. But hey, it's a kid's game anyway. I wouldn't call these perfect by far, but they're just fine in my opinion. I think the game does really shine in the boss fight department though, especially for the time. They're all solid experiences, and while they might get a bit repetitive sometimes, their gimmicks are always smart. Usually you'll want to play off your smarts rather than any brute strength, which is what I'd believe Spider-Man would do. So with Rhino, you'll want to lead him into explosive barrels or electrical outlets when he charges. Or with Carnage, you'll want to get him into the ultrasonic sound that can do heavy damage to him. A couple do just have you shooting web and kicking ass, but I always found these to be my least favorite since they just weren't as creative. The first fight with Venom is basically just a 1v1, but he hits like an absolute goddamn truck, so you have to be as careful as possible. My favorite boss was Doc Ock, which features you having to disable his shield barrier while pressing various buttons, all whilst dodging his attacks. And when you finally do get his shield down, he'll be staggered for a moment, so you have an opportunity to inflict some good damage on him. I think the bosses are kind of a strong suit in this game, and while the gameplay does have its downs, it definitely has its ups with these too. Even though there's weak stuff I mentioned, there's always some redeeming factors there. They ease out combat with adding red arrows towards off-screen enemies, Spider-Man will have his spider sense go off if something bad is about to happen, and there's even a Spidey compass to point you in the right direction during levels. There's even usable costumes to switch out and go play with in the levels if you want to use them, which is always a fun addition, and I really wish more games did this. So, even though there's plenty of issues, I really do think the gameplay still does hold up today. And it can be annoying, but hey, that's what makes playing a PS1 game what it is. The story of Spider-Man PS1 has a lot to unpack. From saving hostages from a bomb to getting chased down by an attack helicopter, there is a lot that happens throughout this game. It takes an approach of having it be you against the world, with all the bad guys, good guys, and police opposing you. This is because at the start of the game, you're shown that someone had framed Spider-Man for stealing one of Doc Ock's inventions and taking it away for himself. This Spider-Man is obviously an imposter, and it's not you, but the public reputation of Spider-Man has taken a bomb, and now you need to fight your way through the city. Starting out, you see a quote-unquote reformed Doc Ock showcasing his new invention, before the fake Spider-Man comes and infiltrates the show, stealing the invention. Eddie Brock and Peter Parker are both standing in the audience here, watching the chaos unfold. Eddie tries to snap pictures of the scene, but fake Spider-Man grapples the camera and shatters it, which makes Eddie lose control and turn into Venom, wanting revenge on Spider-Man. You're also shown, right after, two mysterious figures who look suspiciously like Doc Ock and Carnage, flooding the city with a toxic gas. And this is when you're shown the best part of the whole game. This game is narrated by Stan Lee.
Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike. Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee here. Once again, we find our hero Peter Parker, better known around the world as the Amazing Spider-Man, in a heap of trouble. But this is just the beginning, Spidey fans. So get ready for a true superhero action thriller, packed to the brim with thrills and chills, twists and turns, more supervillains than you can shake a web at, and of course, non-stop web-slinging, wall-crawling action.
His old voice just warms my heart, man. Spider-Man goes out into the city trying to make out what's actually going on. Black Cat tells you that the city bank is being robbed, making that your first target to sort out. You learn all your basic mechanics here, running, jumping, swinging, punching, while you take out some guys on the rooftops and make it to the city bank. You find thugs that have taken workers hostage, and you have to save them while making your way deeper into the facility. You find out they're hosting a bomb in there, and you have to smartly dispose of it before it blows the entire building sky high. Throwing it in the vault, the bomb explodes and no damage is done except to all the people's money that was stored in there. You get a call from J. Jonah Jameson telling you to call the police because Scorpion is about to tear him apart. Now, listen, I understand why Jameson wants to call the police. If I was in that situation, I would probably want to call the police too. But why do you call Peter Parker to tell him to call the police? You have a phone in your hand. Just call them yourself, man. This starts a timed level where you have to swing over to the Daily Bugle as Spider-Man as quick as possible, since there's an ongoing timer of Scorpion making it to Jameson, even though we just saw them in the same room. Anyway, this is where I kind of realized that the auto snap onto buildings feature is kind of gonna get in my way sometimes, since I'm trying to go as fast as possible to this location, but Spider-Man keeps automatically swinging to other buildings in different places that I don't want to go to. It took me a couple tries because of this, but I made it to Jameson, and your first boss starts there. The boss fight with Scorpion involves you needing to keep him away from Jameson by distracting him, because if he kills Jameson, you lose, I guess. You can deal big damage by throwing furniture around the room towards him, and eventually when you take him down, the police get there and try to ice you, but you make a daring escape. As Spider-Man escapes the building, Daredevil appears trying to question you on what happened earlier, and you explain him the situation. He knows you're telling the truth and tries to go off and spread the word to everyone else, but it turns out a police chopper is right on your ass. What follows is the coolest fucking level ever. It's over the top as hell, it's intense, and it's so much fun. The police chopper blows up stuff around you and tries to gun you down as you run and attempt to escape from it, so you have to dodge and weave around missiles, falling parts of buildings, and more. I specifically remembered the first time I had ever saw this game. I was at my friend's house watching him play this section where you have to climb up the building and avoid the collapsing structures, and I thought it was the most awesome thing I had ever seen in my life, even though the game had been 8+ years old at this point. This has always been my favorite level just cause it's badass and it's thrilling. You swing around, you beat up enemies, you climb buildings, basically everything the game has to offer, all while trying not to get blown up, and an absolutely sick track plays in the background. Yeah, you can be an asshole and say that this makes no sense, and the property damage is going to be absolutely through the roof, but you can do that with like everything in this story throughout the game. I just want to have fun with this level, man. Once you make it away from the police, you hear that Rhino is causing some trouble in the town, and you're gonna have to deal with him personally. However, you see on a TV screen that Venom has actually captured Mary Jane and is holding her hostage, waiting for you. While that is your wife, Rhino is terrorizing lots more innocent people, so Spidey has to make the decision on who he wants to save. This boils down to one of my favorite Spider-Man moments of all time, where he actually decides to go for Rhino rather than Venom to save the innocent civilians over his wife.
Being Spider-Man has given me a lot and taken a lot away, but one thing never changes. My responsibility to use my powers for others before myself, no matter what the cost. There are innocent people at Omnitech and they need our help right now. I won't let them down. Then I'll stop Venom.
I feel like this is something you don't see much anymore with Spider-Man. Yeah, he's gonna want to save his wife, but he also has to save the innocent civilians. That's what he does. He assesses the situations he's in and tries his best to save the maximum amount of people, even if he's taking a personal risk by doing so. I just love that cutscene, and it really shows me they knew what they were doing with this character. You head over to Rhino, which starts a new boss fight, in which you have to take him down by getting him to chase into explosive barrels or electrical boxes. This one gets repetitive pretty quickly, and the gimmick's been done in a lot of other games before, but for its time, this was probably a pretty original idea, so I gotta give it that. You take him down, and the police officers show up with Doc Ock. He seems to be helping the police, but basically anyone will be able to kind of guess that this is just an act. I mean, I literally just saw his silhouette earlier game, don't think you're tricking me. You see Black Cat getting loaded into an ambulance since she got hit hard by Rhino, and she tries to warn you that these aren't actually paramedics who look suspiciously like enemies from the first level. But Peter miraculously doesn't hear this and continues on with his day to go find and deal with Venom. You find him and have to chase him down through the city towards his hideout, which takes you through all kinds of settings. First, swinging on rooftops, then down into the sewers, then into a train station, and then into a water control room. This is actually the only character in the game with 2 boss fights, one being fought out on the surface, and one when you get down into the sewers. The first one features just your generic hero battle, where you'll have to punch and shoot webs at Venom until his health gets all the way down. But in his second fight, you'll have to constantly combat him to turn off the valves in the room, since they fill up the area below with water where MJ is trapped. He'll teleport around and turn on different switches, so you'll have to keep track of him and which ones are turned on, all the while getting in some good damage on him to take him down. After this, Spider-Man explains to Venom that he's been framed and it wasn't actually him that broke the camera. So, from this, Venom forgives you, and you two decide to team up to get to the bottom of it. This is a really fun turn of events, as Venom is basically always a villain, so it's fun to see you guys team up to solve the mystery. While I like him being a terrifying-ass monster a bit more than this kind of jokey, fun guy, I think it works well for this game, and I still enjoyed it anyway. They break into the Daily Bugle and find out that it's been overrun with symbiotes. Venom senses Carnage is nearby and jumps away to go find him, whilst Peter discovers that there's symbiote generators in the area. Your goal is to destroy all of them and make it to the bottom of the building, where you find the imposter Spider-Man and figure out that it was actually Mysterio the whole time.
I will crush you once and for all!
You have another boss fight here where you have to destroy his power generators, I guess, on all different layers of his body. So you have to go up and down to destroy each one. This is the only boss with 2 phases, where after you destroy the power generators, he'll try to take you down with lasers instead, so you'll have to destroy those too. Taking him down, you interrogate Mysterio and try to get him to tell you what he knows. He says that a symbiote invasion is imminent and the fog is over the city to quote-unquote prepare everyone for it. Yeah, I don't really know what that means, but that's what he said, I swear.
That fog which blankets the city is preparing everyone in New York for symbiosis!
You're the fool, Mysterio!
You're told to go to the waterfront where the generator is located. Inside, you destroy a few more generators before finding a secret passageway to an underground base with laser turrets and electrified floors. You figure this is where the whole operation is taking place and head deeper in to find who's controlling all of it. You find Black Cat hostage and shut off all the power generators to stop the gas from polluting the city and also free Black Cat. And going in a little further, you finally find the masterminds behind it all, who turn out to be none other than Doc Ock and Carnage. Holy shit. Venom shows up somehow and begins fighting Carnage while you instead fight Doc Ock, having to take down his shields and beat him up. Once you defeat him, you see that Venom lost the fight to Carnage and you instead have to go in to deal with him yourself. There's an ultrasonic device that Doc Ock had built which you use against Carnage, knocking him into it, dealing a ton of damage against him, and thus freeing Cletus of the symbiote once his health is all the way down. However, Spider-Man leaves the symbiote unsupervised and it crawls down and bonds to Doc Ock, waking him up and getting him to start chasing you. You run as fast as you can out of the facility while Doc Ock stays hot on your tail, and the whole place begins to fall apart and explode. You make it out, and Doc Ock falls unconscious from the explosion, so you carry him out of the facility with you. Also, I'd like to mention that the entire place just exploded. So, what happened to Cletus? Is he good? Anyways, you meet up with your other good guy friends and fly away, having finally saved the day. You all play poker and dance together while all the bad guys do the same in their prison cell, and the game ends. I can't lie, this game kind of has a ridiculous story, but in my opinion, it works perfectly. It's such a Spider-Man adventure type story, and that's what makes me love this game. You save civilians, you fight Venom, you uncover a huge operation by Doc Ock. It just feels straight out of a comic book. It's somewhat short, but it feels like a good length for something to power through within a day or two. It took me about 4.5 hours on hard mode this time, so it would probably take much less on any of the easier modes. Despite the shortness though, it still feels like there's so much substance to it, and it feels like you've been through a lot once you finally make it to the end. It's a little predictable at times, and if you really want, there's a lot of stuff you can nitpick, which for the most part I tried to stay away from, but in some parts I couldn't really help myself. But overall, when you don't think about it too much, this game's story is pretty solid. It well complements all of your mechanics in the game, having every feature be used, and it especially feels like the kind of action-adventure game you'd expect for Spider-Man. Overall, I think it still does pretty well, and that's what makes the game worth replaying today. I think this game really does shine in its music department. From the classic Spider-Man theme on Boot Up, to absolutely badass riffs during the game. It's basically all bangers. I don't typically talk about a game's music because I'm really not the type of guy to go listen to a game's soundtrack outside of said game, but this one feels special to me. It has that retro feel of the PS1 time, but it doesn't bog down the music at all. If anything, it almost enhances it. They all have catchy riffs with dope instruments, especially a lot of guitar. It was all done by Tommy Tallarico himself, one of the biggest video game industry icons there is. He's made a ton of other game OSTs and won numerous awards for them, rightfully so. He kind of revolutionized the gaming world sound-wise, so big props to him for really blowing through with this one. The sound design can be kind of weird in some parts, like certain dialogue will just be really crusty sounding compared to others. There's also just awkward gaps in the dialogue sometimes. It can feel a bit like NPCs talking at some points.
Punisher, do you have any threes?
Go fish. So, nice of you to join us for once, Spidey.
All of the voices are great though, especially for Peter Parker. Whoever did the work for Carnage is really annoying, but other than that, I'd say it's really solid. I'd actually argue the casting for Peter was some of the best that there's ever been. That kind of voice is just tailored to the character in my mind.
Yeah, just my luck. I'll probably get blamed for that too. Is that the bank ahead?
I think the best word to describe this game is charming. For me, there's a lot of things to like here. With its fun Spider-Man action story, cool mechanics, banger music, unique bosses, and more, this game really does stand out to me in the Spider-Man game genre. Not a lot of adaptations of this character have been so appealing to me, and not a lot have been that faithful to the character. But this game absolutely nailed that aspect. This is a game that makes you hear this Spider-Man's voice when you read comics. It's just so authentic. Although I haven't played any of the recent ones, I do plan on playing Spider-Man 2018 when the PC port gets released this August. But this game will undoubtedly still be something I hold dear to my heart. Yes, I know a lot of this review has been based on nostalgia from 4-year-old me. And sure, there's gonna be better Spider-Man game alternatives nowadays. Of course there is, that's just how it goes. But old games can still be great, even today. The story can be dumb at parts, but it's the good kind of dumb, the charming kind of dumb. And I think that's what gives this game so much replayability. I only finished replaying the game 2 days ago as of having written this section, and I already feel like hopping back in again. It's funny, has good characters, and even though there's lots of flaws, it's never anything that big. It's a fun, action-packed Spider-Man experience, and I still love it to this day. If you ever feel like hopping back in time for some PlayStation classics, I 100% recommend to give this one a go. It's gonna have to be a 9 out of 10 from me. Thanks so much for watching. If you can, like, subscribe, and even if you're feeling a little devious, go ahead and share the video with some of your friends. That would really mean the world to me. Remember that you can always come talk to me on Twitter and Discord, of which the links are in the description. Thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.